the experience is there. And they are probably the highest scoring potential team out of all these teams. But I don't think that any of these teams are in the clear. I don't think any of these teams could count a fall and still advance. And that puts pressure on every single team.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Season 3 of Flipping Out with Bridget Sloan. I'm your host, Bridget Sloan, and this season we are talking all things NCAA gymnastics, from the athletes to the coaches to the insiders who make it all happen. And for today's guest, Samantha Peszek. Well, Samantha Peszek, the one and only, Sammy P, in the house. Thanks for coming on.
I was just going to say thanks for having me. I really, truly thought you were never going to ask me. I was like, God, I hope this is the week Bridget asked
Cross
me.
your fingers. We have got some exciting stuff to talk about. A lot is happening. Before we get into regionals, though, I haven't seen you at all this season. They never put us on a meet together, which is so... They'll never know unless we try. Like, we'll never know how good it could be unless we try. But
I mean, they do though, because we did NCAAs together last year.
Oh, yeah. And it was great.
Everyone was like, it was great. You guys were so great together. And we were like, I know.
I love when they're like, wow, you guys have good chemistry. And I'm like, I would hope so. I would really hope so.
Yeah.
Well, now that we're coming to the end, we're at our final two meets of the season. What's season been like for you?
Busy, as it is for you and the athletes and the coaches and the travel and all of that. But I feel like it's just been a season of ups and downs. There's been a lot of exciting things that I think the gymnastics community is pumped for. But I think that there's just been a lot of scoring inconsistencies around the NCAA. And I'm sure you hear this in all your coaches' calls. And I hear the same sentiment too, where it's, I think, an appreciation of judges being a little tougher, but confusion with just from what it seems like random deductions instead of, the consistency that I think all of us are hoping for.
Yeah, you can say judging comes up quite often on coaches' calls. You could say that. I do agree, though. I talked with Liz a lot about this, and there will never be a perfect way. Like, there will never be perfect judging because it's subjective. It's humans judging humans. I mean,
right.
It is what it is. But I know that we can get to like a healthy balance. Like, I am confident that we can get there. Do I think what we're doing right now is the way? Not really. But I'm also not a judge. So I don't know what it takes to be a judge. I've never put myself in their position, but it has been a little wild. I like you're describing it as ups and downs. We've had a lot of highs and a lot of lows. But I can definitely speak on the same. I think it's more frustrating to me, and you can chime in, of just when you use the routine and you're calling it and you see little mistakes and you're like, wow, it was so good. But there were little deductions here and there. And then they flash a 10 and you're like, never mind. What did I see?
Yeah. I actually feel like this year, more than any other year that I can remember, I spotted more 10s that didn't get 10s, which I never remember feeling that way. And maybe you're the same way. Coaches and people always ask me about scoring right after a meet. And it's really hard for me to analyze a score during the broadcast because when the score comes in, we're already commentating something else. So most of the time, unless I'm mentally like, oh, wow, that could be a 10, I'm not really clocking scores.
Yeah.
But this year, more than any other year, I did mental note that could be a 10. And then it's like I don't know, 9-9 or something.
Oh, I was going to say 9-8-5.
Well, I was just doing a coach's call with Heather Brink, the head coach of Nebraska, and Emma Spence got a 9.975 last weekend. And she said, yeah, two judges gave a 10, one gave a 9.95, and one gave a 9.85. So the 9.85 and the 10 are thrown out. Then you average the two, obviously. But it just, that's a pretty wide range at this point in the season, in college gymnastics. So that's not, I wouldn't be like, oh, that's encouraging to see and to hear those stories.
Yeah, it is kind of wild, but I mean, I know that they'll figure it out. I'm confident. I know that everything will work out the way it's supposed to. And at this point, all we can do is just keep on keeping on,
I
keep
think
on
the
chugging along.
pendulum has swung, and maybe we're looking for the right pendulum swing. I don't think the swing is where we want it to be yet, but I think we're getting closer. We're knocking on the door, maybe.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That was great. Okay, so we've got a big one this weekend. Regionals, lots happening. There is more gymnastics, I think, happening Wednesday through Sunday than probably the entire season, obviously. But where can people hear you for regionals this weekend?
I will be covering the Seattle regional. And for those that might not know, everyone keeps asking me, we do not travel, broadcasters don't travel for regionals. Um, I think since it's on Plus, because it conflicts with March Madness, if I think that that's the reason why we don't travel. But
Mhm.
um, it's kind of nice for me because I'm in my home setup right now. I think you probably are too, to watch it from home and then also be a gym fan and watch the other regional sites on my couch. So it's kind of fun being able to do that.
I would agree. It is nice to like finish a meet and then just go sit on your couch. That is pretty nice. It is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Seattle Regional, you have four SEC teams. Cool, cool.
Yep.
Um, okay, likewise, I am covering the Utah Regional. A lot of teams that I have not seen, which I think that's exciting. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more work because you have to really deep dive, like obviously into all these teams that you're not super familiar with. But I have to say, back in the day, back in our day, there used to be, I know, back in our day, there used to be like regionals that you could say were easy. Like if you got a good regional and you're like, hey, this is great. It's not a guarantee, but it feels good going into this regional. Would you say that was kind of
Oh, I think maybe guarantee isn't the right word, but I think it was uh what's another word that's right below guarantee?
I
You pretty
know,
good a for sure
promising.
shot.
It was promising. It was
Uh,
promising that you were going to that regional and
Assuming that, you had no multiple mistakes in a meet, then you were going to nationals. Um, but yeah, with this new format and less teams making it to NCAA's, I just think it's changed the game. And the irony of it being on ESPN Plus is that this is like the most nerve wracking and the most pressure meet of the entire season. That I think even experts have no idea what's going to happen because there's upsets every single year since they've changed it to this format.
that is true. I love when they say, who do you think's gonna advance? And I'm like, I have no idea. I That's the thing. What I wanted to get to though is like this year specifically, like I'm looking at all the teams in each regional. There is not a single regional that I would consider easy at all. If anything, I mean, your regional has a lot of great teams. Your regional has a couple teams that haven't peaked just yet in the SEC, and I think that they are continuing, which is exciting to see. And then over to this is Alabama. Alabama again. You've got Florida, Cal, and Alabama, and Oregon State, all in the same regional, and only two teams. Let's be clear. Only two teams will advance out of each regional. It, it's going to get spicy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot that can happen, and I think some teams are peaking at the right time. I think some teams are battling injuries. Um, some teams are utilizing a lot of freshmen, and while you may have seen how they do all season long, sorry, um, you may have seen how they do all season long. You have no idea how they're going to handle the pressure of postseason because there is a lot of pressure on this meet and much more so than conference championships and any regular season meet. So I think freshmen are just a little bit of a gamble. Even the superstar freshmen, you really just don't know what's going to happen. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, or you can also see it as like freshmen are naive and don't really understand yet. And Jeff Gravo told me one time, head coach of Auburn, that ignorance is
Bliss.
no,
Ignorance
he
is
had a different,
oh.
it's something of that sentiment of like, it's great that the freshmen come in and not don't necessarily understand the amount of pressure until the following year. So he's seen a trend with his teams in the past with those freshmen.
I agree. I think I always considered regionals the most nerve-wracking meet because your season was either going to continue on or it was going to end. There were what like that. There were two options. And I feel like you're right. As a freshman, you don't know what's going on. You're just out there competing. And then when you actually understand it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of pressure on my shoulders. There's a lot of weight on my shoulders to advance out of this meet. And I think the amount of upsets that we see as broadcasters in regular season always, it's weird. I feel like come postseason, come regional specifically, there's always a couple where you're like, yeah, I saw that coming. Like I don't want to say surprise, but it's like, yeah, when you watch them in regular season and they have a huge upset, they don't want that to happen again.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most exciting stories of regionals last year was Utah. I'm pretty sure I was commentating that meet, but they started with a fall or 2, and then they just had mistakes sprinkled in, but then they started coming back, and they were fighting every single routine, and I cannot believe they pulled it off, and it was one of the most incredible things. I think a lot of people who aren't gymnastics fans don't understand um, how you don't know what's gonna happen and the predictability of the sport, I would say. And this meet was just so unpredictable, and the fact that they were able to come back was a really incredible story. So I'm excited for those moments of regionals, of which teams can handle a couple mistakes and then come back and still qualify to NCAAs, because there's a few teams out there that probably could do that.
Well, and there's a few teams out there, one specifically, I'm not going to mention them yet because I don't want to jinx anything. But there are a couple teams that haven't advanced yet
Mm.
in their program, or they haven't advanced in a while, and they are looking good this year. So I am really excited, but I do want to mention, I'm sure you I'm sure you and John have talked a lot about this, but like the realignment. I think everybody thought the realignment was gonna be, I don't say a bad thing, but there were just a lot of questions of like, why in the world are Cal and Stanford and ACC? Like, why are they traveling across the United States to
Yeah.
be within their conference? But I think it's interesting. So the Utah uh, has, we have UCLA, we have Utah, and then oh, Stanford specifically. So those three schools, or the realignment happened, and those three all won their conference championship.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, so we have three conference champions coming into the exact same regional. And mind you, it's 2 days of competition, not to mention,
Free for some teams,
I'll
well,
say,
they
not to
hope.
mention the playing round, right? The playing round. So there is just like a lot riding on this meet. And I feel like in the past, it really didn't get the recognition it deserved. And I think as broadcasters, because we've been there, we've experienced it, we can be like, no, guys, this is the meet that really counts. Um, I want your thoughts on just coming from like what happened with championships and like conference championships to where they are now. And were you surprised by what happened at SECs? Because that's what you covered.
Think back. Um, I was surprised a little bit that Oklahoma had some mistakes. They have been looking just so bulletproof and so consistent literally since that first meet. Like I think I said this on air too, that if you looked at their first meet, that could be like a national championship meet. They just can't come out of the gate so strong. So and they've had tough competition all season because they're now in the SEC. And so that was a bit surprising to me. Um I think one of the other things that surprise is not really the right word because a team like Florida always is just so stacked with great athletes and gymnasts that have competed under a lot of pressure. And so I guess surprise is not the right word, but to see them deliver in really critical moments, I feel like they're kind of, I'm not going to say the underdog team because that's certainly not what I mean, but I think that they've been overlooked this season. They started off, they had some meets that didn't go perfectly, but then they had some meets that were like huge, high scoring meets. And so they obviously have the potential, but to get such a high bar score, and Selena Harris was obviously on, their vaults looked incredible. Like just to see what they are capable of was really cool. I was bummed that I think they got a little ahead of themselves on beam, and I think beam is actually their best event. So I know they're probably kicking themselves because I thought Florida had it in the bag going into that last event. But then again, LSU is a really strong vault team. So yeah, it was really exciting to watch. And I'm sure Florida got back in the gym and uh, is tightening up some things on beam over there. But yeah, showing their potential on bars and vault, I think was cool to see because I don't think it's I think they're peaking at the right time is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think there's a couple teams, in my opinion, that are peaking at the right time. Like, I think Cal and Stanford, and again, knowing the ACC championships and covering them, they looked really good. Like,
Yeah.
really good. And it was really awesome. First of all, ACC championships were electric. It was such a fun experience. That was my first time ever. Obviously, it's the second time the ACC championships have happened. So, they're still a little green, but it was so cool to see the support
Yeah.
just for gymnastics in general, yes, but like North Carolina shows out for their teams. And that was
Oh,
really cool. It was very, very cool. But one thing that I noticed is like UNC. I'll be honest, UNC was not on my radar for a majority of the season. I'm sorry. It's just I wasn't covering them, so they weren't on my radar. But that does not go without saying they are a great team.
yeah.
And they have a lot of great potential. And like, I'm pretty sure they put together their best meet at ACC championships. And
Yeah.
it's like, what a great way to, put your best meet together. And it's like all these teams, I think they're kind of starting to figure out that being good in regular season, very
Mhm.
important, but making mistakes in regular season, even more important.
Yeah.
Because then when you get to the postseason, you're like, don't worry, I got this. Like, I'm here. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of teams these days they're now peaking a little bit later in the season. And that's not to say that the teams that are coming out hot aren't doing it right, but I just feel like I'm noticing a trend of like easing into season, switching up lineups way more frequently. I thought there were more lineup changes this season than any year that I've been a part of.
I
Yeah.
think that there's an importance on depth where there hasn't ever been to this degree before. And, you hear all the time on our coaches call, oh, we're warming up 8, we're warming up 9, and then deciding. And that's because this sport, as you know, is brutal on your body and you just need athletes to last all season. So I feel like teams more so than ever have been so intentional about building their depth so that they can go in and see who competes first, who competes in the lead out spot best, Who competes in the anchor best? What's our best combination for high scoring potential? And you have to kind of experiment with that at the beginning of the season in order to figure out what the right concoction is for postseason. So yeah, I would agree with you that I feel like there is a lot of lineup changes um, to utilize their depth and to figure out that perfect combination they want for the postseason.
Can you imagine? Let's go back in time. We are at You're at Pac-12 championships. I'm at SECs, and we are warming up 9 people. The amount of stress I would feel of not knowing whether I'm in the lineup or not. Like, I try to emphasize how impressive it is that these athletes that don't know if they're going to be in the lineup, they're still warming up. And especially, I'm just going to call out Oklahoma. They do it all the time. Like KJ has even said, she's like, yeah, on vault sometimes, if I need a guaranteed hit, I put in Audrey Davis. And I always think to myself, if I were Audrey Davis and I got pulled aside and said, you're up, I think I would have a little mini heart attack and then I would be fine. Like I would be fine. But that just has to be stressful. And again, that I've never experienced that, but
Miss Val actually used to do that with our teams. But it wasn't for all the spots. So it was like if you earned or solidified your spot in lineup, then you always generally knew where you went. But there was usually a few spots that were like four athletes trying to get 2 spots or whatever. And also, if you destroyed your warm up, you were just immediately pulled. Like that was not acceptable, which I had a tough transition with because I feel like that was kind of my thing. Like I didn't like having great warm-ups until I could beat it. So that didn't fly. Um, but yeah, that was something that we did, and I also did not like that. But it's
wouldn't
working
agree with
for these
that.
teams, just so you know, like Oklahoma, it's working for them, and it's
Yeah.
working for um, the teams that do have a lot of depth.
I wouldn't say that your thing was having a bad warm up, Samantha. I think we need to, that was not your thing. But I do understand
I
sometimes
didn't
when
destroy a warm up.
you did or didn't.
No, no, like destroy, like fall a bunch. Like I didn't fall. I wasn't like sloppy or like unsafe, but sometimes it just would take a little longer to get my head screwed on straight.
Well, and I think sometimes it's like when we talk about doing angry beam, like angry beam
Yeah,
is the best beam. That is the
yeah,
best time to do beam. And it's like sometimes when you do have a bad warm up, you're like, this is going to be the routine of my life. Like,
yeah.
no doubt in my mind.
And
So
if
I
it's like
can,
too perfect, it's harder to repeat that in the meet versus like having one thing to think about to fix the warm up turn or something. I don't
did
know.
you think about a lot on beam? Like, were you saying things in your head while you were going
No.
on beam?
Yeah, did you not?
No,
What?
I did
You
not.
didn't have any mental cues on beam?
The majority of my mental cues were like, awesome job. You're right down the center. This is great. You're gonna be
Oh,
on the beam.
that's something.
I mean, yeah, but then it would like I used to sing a song.
Okay.
I was
Hmm.
I was more of a song singer, or I would like mouth a
Mhm.
song. It kept me on rhythm, which was nice. But like
Okay.
I do know people like yourself that have like very strong mental cues. I'm like, yeah, I did not do that. But you know what? It's whatever works for you.
It's true.
Works for
It's
you.
true.
Okay. So I want to go through each regional, and I'm just going to go through teams because we don't have enough time to really go through each and every regional. But like, I want to go through the teams, where they're at, what they're doing, and who you think will advance. Yep, putting you on the spot.
Are you doing
Well,
this too?
no, this is my podcast. I don't have to.
No, you have to answer too, Bridget, Sloan.
Ooh. Okay, well, maybe if mine don't align with yours,
Okay.
I will choose mine.
You can't copy me though. We have to alternate.
Alternate.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just, you know what? Let's get the first one over with and then we'll see how it goes. Okay. So we're going to start with the Washington. regional, which is your regional. You have Oklahoma, Missouri, Georgia, Auburn, Arizona, Nebraska, Arizona State, Illinois, and UC Davis. Who are your two that you have advancing? And maybe who do you think could really like add a little spice to the meat?
I think Oklahoma is a lock, as close to a lock. I think they've proven in past years that they can have a mistake and come back and still make it to NCAAs. So I feel really good about Oklahoma. I'm really high on Mizzou this year. I feel like they're upperclassmen and seniors. They have the hard work, they have the passion, they have the grit, they have the team chemistry. When I've seen them throughout the season, they just they feel like they have the it factor, you know?
Mhm.
You know.
I would agree.
But my question marks are Arizona has been crushing it and Auburn is has been doing pretty well as well. Um and they're coming back from some injuries, so they're putting some lineups together, but the fight that they showed at SECs, and it's a little hard to talk about some of the other schools just because I haven't commentated them this year. Um, so this is gonna be, SEC heavy in that regard, but I feel like I'm gonna go with Missouri and Oklahoma.
Okay, so I'm going to counter that
Okay.
because I do agree. I think Missouri and Oklahoma. I mean, I'm a Missouri fan. I have been for the last couple of years. Like I am Shannon Welker, whatever you're doing over there, whatever secret sauce you got going on, keep it going because I am so here for it. But I actually think Georgia has been really they've been on the rise. I think there were a lot of question marks about a new coaching staff. You kind
Yeah.
of come into the season with a lot of question marks of like, is it going to go well? How are things going to go? And I feel like Cecile has just taken that program by storm and really elevated their gymnastics. Like I can tell from a viewer standpoint, their gymnastics is cleaner. It is cleaner.
Yeah.
It is more precise. They look more confident out there. Like I think Georgia, they're not out of it. I'll just say that. They're
Yeah.
not a lock.
They had some mistakes at SECs. And so, but I agree with you. I covered them earlier in the season and they have the ingredients to put it together, but they would need to put it all together in my opinion.
They would have to have their best meet. Like their best meet would need to be at regionals in order
Yes.
to really keep their
But
hand
I
in.
also I also kind of think it's just going to come down to sticks.
It
For
always
the teams
does.
that are close, it's like who's going to stick the most vaults? Who's going to minimize any of the landing deductions? Like that to me is going to be the kicker. Like it's going to be less about hitting and more about like how solid is your hit.
Yeah, I think we've moved on from like we're trying to do big gymnastics to now it's we're trying to do big gymnastics, but we are trying to stick those
Yeah.
landings. Because you're right. And it's gonna come down to vault landings. I'm confident in that. It's gonna come down to vault landings because I believe and I know that there's a lot of people out there, whoever sticks the most vaults normally advances.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it is. So
I think that vault is the new beam. You know,
yes. Yes. I
we used
agree.
to be like, "Oh, like beam is so nerve-wracking," and not that it's not anymore, but I think vault is much more nerve-wracking because you can't try to stick because then you're gonna try too hard and probably have other mistakes, and so I think it's the most, unpredictable event this year, and to your point, I think the teams that do the best on vault have the best chance of advancing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I actually think you might have even been the one to say it that like vault is the new beam, and I was like, yes, it is. Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
I told, our production or, like, SECs, I was like, "I really wanna, like, go with this vibe," and everyone's like, "You have to, like, explain what that means," and also, the reason why I said that is every coach that I've interviewed always talks about the mental side of vault now. before this year, I have never heard a coach be like, oh, yeah, the mental side of vault, which probably always existed to some degree. But this year, because there's such a focus on landings and sticks, I feel like there's this heightened awareness on the mental side of vault, which usually you talk about the mental side of beam a lot more. So, anyway, I was excited about my comparison.
I mean, it's true though. Maybe there needs to be a vault queen boot camp or something. But it's true. And I also, to your point, I think athletes put so much pressure on themselves on balance beam a lot of times, and that has totally transitioned to vault. You see athletes trying so hard to stick that they're under rotating, or they're trying to go so hard that they're flying out of control. And there's a lot of pressure in gymnastics regardless. Mm-hmm. And it used to be, beam was the high pressure event. Well, beam is still the high pressure event. We're adding vault to that list too. So, okay. I like your picks. I do. We're going to move on.
So you're picking Georgia, Oklahoma.
Oh, no. I am picking Missouri and Oklahoma, but I am saying Georgia could really keep things interesting. I think, and like I said, I think they're peaking at the right time, and I just really love what Cecile and that coaching staff has done with the program. So
okay, and Ryan Roberts.
And yes, thank you. So okay, Alabama. Let's see who we got. Florida. Ooh, this is a hard. Ooh, man. Florida, Cal, Alabama, Oregon State, NC State, North Carolina, Iowa, Clemson, and Rutgers. That is okay. Huh. What you got? Yeah.
I mean, I think stating the obvious, Florida, Cal, Alabama, and Oregon State have just been doing really well. I think Alabama's NQS does not reflect where they are. I think that's a team that's been peaking at the right time. I haven't gotten to commentate Cal this year, but I mean, their gymnastics, and I know the athletes on that team well, and their gymnastics is always just so beautiful to watch and very technically sound. And I just really enjoy watching their gymnastics. And they have a lot of athletes on their team that have been in high pressure situations. So the experience is there. Then, of course, you have Florida where the experience is there. And they are probably the highest scoring potential team out of all these teams. But I don't think that any of these teams are in the clear. I don't think any of these teams could count a fall and still advance. And that puts pressure on every single team.
Yeah, you can't count a fall anymore and win a meet or, advance like that. That doesn't happen anymore. I think it actually really only happened one time in history. I was a part of that history in the making. Pretty cool. Anyway, but you can't do that anymore. I mean, that's just, first of all, it was unheard of back then, but right now there's just absolutely no way because the talent is just so elevated, so above and beyond. But the only thing I'm going to say about Cal, and I'm a big Cal fan. I love Liz and Justin. I really appreciate.
You had Liz on the podcast, right?
Yeah, I did, and she was wonderful as always. I really want her to write a book. I really am pushing her to write a book. But the one thing I will say is that at ACCs they had a few mistakes. They did, but they also, in my opinion, they got underscored. It's so interesting how there were scores that were so I was like, whoa, that's a gift. And then there were other ones that I was like, that was beautiful. And she went like 9825. So I think they are going to be going into regionals with, I don't want to use the word like vengeance, but like they're hungry. They didn't have, this is a team, like you said. And I think, didn't you say that they don't do cookie cutter gymnastics? Isn't that a Sam quote?
Yes. Which so I love.
Yes. They're not afraid. They're not afraid to do the big E skills on floor. They're not afraid to do the gorgeous elements on beam. Like they're just not afraid of their gymnastics. And then when you have Alabama, like you said, if you looked at their NQS, you would have a lot of questions. But again, NQS does not reflect the ability of a team. They're just numbers to me. Personally, I'm like, they're just numbers. If I'm an athlete, I'm not paying attention to my NQS. I'm paying attention to myself and, my team and all those things.
Yeah.
And then you're right. There's a lot of great teams in this regional, but those top three specifically have a history of success. They have a history of being, Cal had the best season of their lives last year. And it was kind of cool because they really weren't riding that wave into this season, but it does make you feel good when you go into the next season knowing that, like, hey, we did that last season. Like, we can do this again, but even a little bit better. And I actually had the pleasure of covering Oregon State and another team. They looked really good. And I just feel like they've been improving every single meet. So yeah, that one's gonna.
I think Oregon State could be a sneaky team.
I love the sneaky teams.
I mean, it's not sneaky that they have Jade Carey, I guess.
What?
It's not sneaky that she's been doing so well every week, but I feel like I used to say this year one of broadcasting for Pac-12 that Oregon State has always been the most underrated team in all of the gymnastics teams in the country, in my opinion.
I would agree.
And I mean, when I was on the team at UCLA, we were beaten by Oregon State multiple times. And so it's always the team that like they just sneak on in there and you're like, whoa, whoa, and now that I'm obviously not, there's no Pac-12 and I don't commentate them as much. It's hard to follow along, but I see some highlights and I see the scores and they are not a team to be overlooked.
No, I agree.
Tanya and Michael do a phenomenal job with that entire program, and I think it should be talked about more.
That's why we're talking about it. That's why. I don't think you're alone there. Okay, so who are your two? I know this one really got me.
You go first this time.
No, my podcast, my rules.
I don't know. I think it's going to be Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And between Cal, Alabama, and Oregon State, it's going to be whoever's on that day. To me, at this point in the season, those three teams feel pretty even.
Yeah. I would agree.
Jade's got to be on her game for Oregon State. I think, Lily and Gabby have been crushing it all season long for Alabama. So it's like, I feel like those teams have some critical athletes that if they show up and have a good day, it's going to be hard to beat them.
Yeah. I agree. I think this actually is one of the hardest regionals, personally.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's no easy regional, but here's my toss up. I do think Florida has a very high chance. Like statistically looking at it, like you said, they are absolutely capable of putting up the highest score in this regional.
Yeah.
But the one thing about Alabama, like they're kind of doing angry gymnastics because they're getting overlooked and they're not, how do I say this? They're not having the season they thought they were going to have. Let's be honest. Like they really started out it was a little rocky and, things have been improving, but again, it's all about peaking at the right time. I think Al and Alabama, like you said, Oregon State, sneaky team. You never know. This one, I don't know. I really don't. I don't have a. All right, next. All right, on to the next. All right, next regional, Pennsylvania. This is the Pitt regional. Cool. All right, this one actually, again, another freakishly hard one. You have LSU, Michigan State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, West Virginia. I feel like this is like Big Tens. There's a
Yeah.
lot of Big Ten schools here. Um, like you mentioned with Florida,
Yeah.
LSU does have the highest potential scoring, just again looking at it. But I mean, Michigan State, gosh, I want them to make it
I
so
know.
bad.
I know. I really feel like to me, they're a similar team to Missouri in my mind. But Missouri's made it to NCAA's before, whereas Michigan State has not. But in a similar tone of like they have really strong leadership from their upperclassmen, and they're just doing really great gymnastics and fun gymnastics. They're a really fun team to cover. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm feeling like if they just do their normal, but the important thing for Michigan State is like to not try too hard because they want it so bad. And of course, that's true for any team that you can't grip onto it too much, otherwise other mistakes will come. But I feel like Michigan State, like if this is their year,
I agree. And I will say, if you're looking at it, Kentucky, another always underrated team. They kind of get overlooked, and I don't know why. They have amazing gymnastics. I think Tim Garrison he's so great at
yeah,
building that program and having his athletes peak at the right time, making sure that they're just ready to go always.
yeah,
Another sneaky team. Do not count them out.
yeah. I mean, I think do I think the momentum is in Michigan State's court? Yes. However, I mean, I've seen Kentucky compete, and they have really strong gymnastics. And then you have Arkansas, and they didn't get to compete in the conference championships. So you want to talk about angry gymnastics? They're going to be that. If that was me on that team, I
Oh
would
yeah.
be like so intense to want to show everybody what their potential is because it's not like they didn't make SECs because they were having a bad year. Like they were doing great. They had great meets. They put some really strong scores together. So I think that's a team too that could surprise people.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Arkansas with them not competing at SECs like that puts a fire under you. And like I said, angry beam, great. Angry gymnastics in general. I mean, go hard, go big. I think another team that's kind of been overlooked in the past, but this one is, if I had to guess, which I'll go first now because I actually have my two. It
Oh,
was now that I'm ready, I
okay.
would say I would say LSU and Michigan State. But like you said, Michigan State, be normal, do your normal gymnastics, and you are great.
Mhm.
Kentucky, do your normal gymnastics, and you are not out. Like you are not out of the mix. I think Arkansas needs to hit their one of their best meets,
Yeah.
which is possible, like so incredibly possible. And then I also think like I don't know. I don't want to like leave out Michigan. I know that they're not having like their dream year, but part of me is always like, you've made it before. Like that should tell you that you can do it again. End of story. And sometimes you got to just like dig deep and just show out because what do you have to lose? Like part of me is
Yeah.
like, what do you have to lose?
And they have really strong athletes on their team.
Yeah, I agree. I think, well, everybody I think has super strong athletes these days. But to your point, again, Michigan has not had the season that they wanted to have this year. And instead
Yeah.
of crumbling, they haven't been crumbling, but I just feel like it's time for them to put a meet together. And I think that they can. I really do.
Yeah.
I believe in them. All right, last one, the Utah
Okay.
Regional. It's mine. It's one I'm covering. Really hard. Really hard. For this regional, you've got Utah, UCLA, Minnesota, Stanford, Denver, another sneaky team, Southern Utah, Boise State, BYU, and Utah State. I mean, again, like we said earlier, Sam, there is no easy regional. That doesn't exist anymore. This one is going. You have the Big Ten champion, you have the Big 12 champion, yeah, and you have
I
the
think this
ACC.
is the hardest regional.
Yeah, no, I
I mean,
agree.
the top 5 teams have all scored above a 197.5 this season. And then if you look at BYU, Boise State, and Southern Utah, they've all scored in the high 196s. Like this is such a close regionals. I think this
Mhm.
is the closest one. There's the most amount of teams that in my opinion have a shot to make it. So this is going to be whoever is having the best day. Now, I think if UCLA and Utah have their best day, it's going to be really hard for the other teams to sneak in because I think those are the 2 schools that have the highest scoring potential when they're at their best.
Yeah.
But I think, both of those teams have not been perfect all year, but they both have shown that they can score high on each event. So it's not it's not unheard of for me to think that something else could happen in this regional. But, Utah's been to every single NCAAs. We all know that. I think that they have the most amount of pressure of any other team at any other regional site. But then you have like Grace McCallum, who's a senior, and the senior class has been third in the last 4 seasons. So they are really hungry for a national championship, not just to make it to nationals,
Yeah, they
a
want
national
it.
championship. Then you have UCLA, who started the season with a 195 and then grew to a 198.45. So it's like possibly the most improved team. So they have the ingredients for very high scoring team, especially on floor,
Yeah, I think. Why do you think Utah has the most pressure, though? I'm curious.
because they've never not made nationals. So I
Oh,
think that it's talked about every year at regionals of like this is the 42 NCAA appearances, most of all time. They have qualified to every single one. If they make it this time, it will be their 43rd consecutive NCAAs. And as you know, with this new format, it's so much harder to make it to NCAAs as opposed to, just kind of being in the mix in the
yeah.
past. So I think that because of that extra pressure of like it's this historic legacy at Utah, I think it adds a lot of pressure too. I think Carly Dockendorf, their head coach, has done a really good job. I remember her, you know, talking about a quote last year before regionals of like records get broken and things happen, and I think it's her attempt to try to relieve some of the pressure that the athletes might feel with this, legacy of Utah gymnastics.
Yeah, hmm, that's hard because yeah, they just put enough pressure on themselves by themselves. Like they don't need any assistance in that field. Like they do it themselves. They know how to put pressure on themselves. And you're right. When you just the word legacy alone adds pressure. Like it does naturally. Um, but yeah, I'm excited about this regional. Like I said, I'm covering it, and it's a lot of teams that I haven't seen. Fun
Yeah.
fact: the only team that I've covered is Stanford.
That's
So it was kind
a
of
fun team.
exciting.
I covered them earlier in the season,
I have
and
been
I love Tabitha.
I would say I have been so impressed with Stanford the last couple of years, but specifically this year, like Tabitha does, she's just so cool. Like she's just so cool. And I feel like she does such an amazing job with that program. Um, but I will say I love covering teams that I haven't in regular season because it's just like exciting to do a deep dive into these teams. And like you said,
Yeah.
see their progression.
Yeah.
UCLA starting off rough, but look at them now. They are the first ever, for them, Big Ten champions. They come to the Big Ten, and look at them now.
Yeah, well, I covered UCLA twice this year and Utah once this year. And both of those teams are also really fun to cover. So I'm sure you'll have fun.
I'm excited. Okay, so who do you got?
I'm going Utah UCLA on this one.
Kind of where
I
my
think
head was at.
their scoring potential outweighs potential risks for me on this one. But I think Stanford is a sneaky team in this one.
I was going to say, I think Stanford is a sneaky team. And I think if Denver and Minnesota had their best meets, they would absolutely be in the mix. Like they would be a potential. I think that they could completely again, like you said, if Utah and UCLA are having really great days, it's going to be hard to advance.
And both of those teams have been peaking later in the season too, and they just look sharp.
Yeah.
Both conference champions. I just think they both of those teams seem in the zone. And
Yeah.
because of them being in the zone and their high scoring potential, it's moving the needle for me
I would agree.
in my
I would
predictions.
agree. All right. Well, that was fun. That was
That was fun.
great. We have some
Didn't tell me I
more.
was gonna have to pick teams.
Well,
Sneaky,
yeah,
sneaky. Talk about
you
sneaky
never
people.
know. You just never know what you're going to get on this podcast. But we did ask the people on social media to answer. Well, I said if they have any questions, and obviously they do.
Okay.
I will say, Sam, it's so weird. There are just like a lot about you. We can talk about that. We can talk about that.
I wonder who asked those questions.
I don't know. Okay, so who is calling what regional? You and John are Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Ross Jr. and I are Utah. I believe Bart and Trinity are Alabama. And Alex and Kennedy are Pittsburgh.
I think so.
I feel confident in that. I feel confident.
I think so.
Yeah. So lots of gymnastics happening this weekend.
Yes.
Unfortunately, no one will be on site. Someone asked if we'll be in Seattle. First of all, I wish I was in Seattle with Sam, but Sam's not going either way. I really like this question, and I think you'll be able to answer it really well because you have a lot of different platforms of broadcasting that you've been on. But it says, how has the landscape of gymnastics broadcasting changed since you began?
That's a good question. I feel like there's more opportunity. There's way more meets being televised, which means there needs to be way more broadcasters. And I think that's great, one, for women's sports to be shown a lot more. But I also think from a broadcasting perspective, it's great because, take you and I, for example, it's good to bounce ideas off of, oh, how do you say this? Or what analogy do you use for this? Or how do you explain this gymnastics term? Or, I can't believe I said this meet, And so to have that sort of camaraderie, there just really wasn't as many opportunities when I started out. And so to have that now and to see a lot of the new commentators coming in is really cool to see. And I think this isn't really from a broadcasting standpoint, but gymnastics changes all the time. The rules change, the focus changes, the judging changes. And so I think how you commentate also has to evolve with the changes of the sport. So I usually try and pick like one gymnastics term a meet to try and explain. or figure out a concise way to explain. So a big focus this year was trying to explain concisely what built-in deductions meant. And to gymnastics fans, we obviously know what a built-in deduction is, but to try and explain that in a very short amount of time concisely is tough. So I took a couple meets to try and do that. I hope it landed. Um, I don't know.
Oh,
I felt good about it. I asked a lot of coaches and came up with a good definition. But yeah, so things like that. I mean, for me, broadcasting is so fun because it's like a challenge to get better each broadcast and see if I can improve and see if I can, have good chemistry with my broadcast partner, whoever that is, and our sideline, um, Taylor Davis. So yeah, it's always a fun challenge for me, and it gives me that adrenaline, kind of like competing did. So
I like it. I like it. This one made me laugh because so many people think that there's no prep that we do, that we just show up. And
who
yeah,
thinks what about our what's
here's
coming out
the
of our
thing.
mouth seems like it's not
Okay,
planned.
but here's the thing. I can appreciate someone thinking that we don't do prep because to
That's
me, that
flattering.
means that does that mean that you think that I'm just so good that I don't need to prep? It's probably not what they're thinking, but the amount of prep that goes into every single meet, really, in my opinion, it starts in like preseason. Because once we get our schedules, we start looking like looking at the athletes, looking at the returners. There's a lot of prep that goes into commentating.
Yeah, I think every single meet I have about 10 pages of notes for just a dual meet.
Okay, I don't have 10 pages of notes, but I do
Well, they're
my
not full pages
you just have
usually.
10 pages of notes, not like full
Right.
page notes, but like they're
Like Volt, for example, would go, half of the page
you don't
and
want to show
then
us your notes?
well, this is not my notes. This is stats. Anyway, it's a secret, okay?
Okay.
It's a secret. I'll send it to you later. You were
Thank
also
you.
emailed the same notes, just so you know.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
But yeah, lots of prep and
Yeah.
coaches interviews and just consolidating stats, looking at teams notes. There's a lot that goes into it.
Well, and I think one thing that's really funny to me is like, Sam, you could have 10 pages of notes for a dual meet, and you could only say three things from those notes. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
times the notes are, for me at least, like I've really been not like obviously I listen to the coaches calls every time, but I've actually been taking like really thorough notes during the coaches calls because that's when I do think you get the like you just get the little nuggets.
Yeah.
And those are so important when, you've got some downtime or especially on like floor and beam, some slower events where you kind of let it breathe, but you always want to make sure that you have something to give the audience. So I think the coaches calls for, at least for me, have become way more important as a broadcaster than they were in the past. Cause I feel like in the past I just was like, oh yeah, like I'm just calling the routines. Like, do I really need all of this information? Now I always listen to it, but I really rarely took like thorough notes, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So I feel like that's been exciting this season. I feel like there have been so many times where I'm like, wow, thank goodness I took such good notes because I have some time and now I can tell my story. Great.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's the best when you're able to, like, I mean, our whole job as a broadcaster is to educate and entertain in the most concise way possible. So it's really tough to do because a lot of the times um your bosses have a different vision for maybe gymnastics fans, and you're kind of the middle ground of like satisfying the knowledgeable gymnastics fan and also making sure new fans are still being able to follow along. And I think that's probably like the toughest part of broadcasting is figuring out how to make that happen.
I feel like it's the hardest balance.
Yeah.
as a broadcaster. It really is the hardest balance because you want to say enough that you can educate, but you also don't want to say too much to if a new viewer were to pop in, if they can't follow the sport, they're not going to watch it.
Right.
If they don't have a clue what's going on, they're not going to watch. So yeah,
Right.
I would say that that's definitely I like that. That's one of the hardest things to
Yeah.
balance. When did you and Sam first meet? We were just talking about this. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I would imagine it was when we were like 10 ish, maybe older, younger. No.
No, I'd say 10's probably right. I think it's probably like an elite qualifier, which I probably did when I was 11 and you were
Okay.
10,
Yep.
or maybe I was 12 and no, I would have been 11 or 12.
Okay.
But for those that don't know, we both grew up doing gymnastics in Indiana together. So Bridget is 1 year younger than me, but
Okay.
usually you do camps in the same state camps or regionals, or you just see each other at meets. So it's tough to say because we probably saw each other in passing for years.
What? Oh, super camp. That's
Super
what they
camp.
were. I did not like super camp.
I
I
loved
know.
camp.
Yep. I
Funny
was
that
going
my job
to
is now camps.
I mean, that makes sense.
It makes
Oh
sense.
man. Yes. I remember super camps. Gosh.
God, camps are the best. You gotta, like, see all your friends that you didn't get to train with, and you gotta, like, work with new coaches, and there's a different vibe. I love
All I
super camp.
remember is that it was always super hot and half the gyms didn't have air conditioning. So you were just sweating for hours.
We only went to the gym that had air.
All right, moving
I don't
on.
know
Next
if your gym
question.
didn't have air
That's
conditioning.
really, really cool, Sam. That's great. When I went to super camp, it built character.
But, like, can we just get some air? It's like an indoor sport.
Oh, I know. I
It's just an
mean,
indoor sport.
it's so funny to me how now I walk into arenas and I'm like, oh gosh, it's so cold. I'm like, wow. And I think back to all the days of like training in Indiana during summers, and you would walk into you wouldn't even know that you walked from the outside to the gym because it was the same temperature. You would have no
Yeah.
idea.
Which, for those of you that may not know this, after the Olympics, I moved to Bridget's gym to train with her because my
Best
coach
time
left
of
me, in
life.
short. No, my coach went back to China to take over family businesses. I knew this before the Olympics was happening. And so I did switch over to Bridget's gym so that I had a training buddy. And they didn't have air conditioning, and it was a hard fall.
Yep, yep.
Hard
But
fall.
look at all the lessons you learned without air conditioning.
I learned that I was thirsty a lot. I
Well,
learned how much I could sweat and slip off the beam.
yep, hydration. It's key. It's key to
Hydration.
living. So you're welcome for teaching me that and helping
Thank
build
you.
that for you.
I've
You're
always
welcome.
I've always been a weather wimp. I'm thinking about it now. I live in Austin, Texas, and it's very hot. So
That is
that's what it
true.
taught me to prepare for living in Austin.
See, look at that. So these next ones, man, it's should you and Samantha go on a vacation? Yes. I think that would be a great idea. I am
Thank you for
all
suggesting that,
what
stranger
what
on the internet.
what an excellent suggestion. When are you gonna visit Samantha? Well,
That is a good question. That is
Sam,
a great question. Because if you recall, I visited you this year.
yes you did. Yes, you did. I I will say this right now. I do have a lot going on at the moment, but I think once we get settled in the next like 2 months, after June, we've got a lot going on until June. After June, my schedule will be a little bit more open. So who knows? Yeah, maybe I'll pop over to Austin. I do love it there. I'm a big fan. I am a huge fan.
Thank
So,
you. But
all right, next question.
mm,
Final question. When did you first know you wanted to be friends with Samantha?
oh, that's a
Wow.
good question.
It's a really good question. Um, I mean, being on the same Olympic team did really
That's when you
help.
knew? Not before
No,
then?
no, it
Not
was before that.
Are you sure it was not before then?
I would say it was, I feel like, actually, I would say our friendship got really strong. And this is even later when you went off to college. Like after we trained together and then you went off to college is when I think we became super close. But
Absence makes the heart grow fonder, is that
that is, distance makes the heart grow stronger. Yes, it really does. But no, I feel like, I mean, but we bonded at camps a lot because you're right. We were always at the same camps, and you
yeah,
know, it was a lot of fun though because it's always nice. And I felt like because I didn't have a huge team that I like trained with, and I didn't come from a huge gym, that it
yeah.
was always like I kind of always knew that wherever I was going, you were gonna be there, which was comforting.
Sorry.
No, it was I'm saying that in a
Oh,
good way. Like it was just like a comforting, like, okay, well, I'm going to this camp. I know
yeah.
Sam's gonna be there.
And we'd be on, like, the same flights and stuff, and both of us had
Yeah,
male coaches, so it was nice to have, like, a buddy.
yeah. I would agree. I would
They we
agree.
would I think our coaches would call it, like, the Indiana team. Like, "Oh, Bridget
I
and
mean,
Sam, the Indiana team," and we're like
this town. We're like, awesome,
but, yeah,
awesome.
I think when we started training together, it was, like, a different level of friendship. It turned more to, like, a sisterly relationship, and for those that might not know, Bridget and I are opposite in every single way possible,
What?
which is, I think, what makes our friendship so easy and strong
That
because
is true.
she's the calm to my storm,
Thank you.
and what are the other ones we used to say?
I don't know. I'm an honorary Peshek. I mean,
Yeah, my family adopted you.
yeah, I'm so honored. I mean, Ed really is the best second dad I could ask for.
Yeah,
And Luann.
he's gonna love this shout out. He's gonna
I
love this shout
mean, and Jesse, I've always wanted a bonus sister. Jesse.
Be
Jesse
honest,
really tells me how it is, you know? She doesn't hold
who's
back.
more of a sister to you, me or Jessie?
I'm not gonna answer that question. I think you already know the answer. It's you. But Jesse was always great. Okay, so we went over a lot with regionals, but
Mhm.
I do want you to be able to just quickly, if you were standing on a podium and all of the teams were in front of you for regionals, what would be your good luck speech?
Oh, that's really nice. I would just tell the athletes to close your eyes and think back to preseason and all those moments that it was really hard. I mean, you and I have been through postseason or preseason, and the workouts you've done, the skill changes you had to do, getting in routine shape, hitting those first solid ones in the gym, and think about the growth that you've had with your team to make it to this point right now and just appreciate all of the hard work you've all put in. And you've done the work, you've done the routines, you've done the numbers, and just have fun and make it happen. I think going in, having zero doubt and no regrets, and just letting loose and letting it rip is the best way to go. And I think that the teams that go in with that mindset are going to be the teams that we see at nationals.
That wraps up today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed. Be sure to tune in each week because I'll be dropping new episodes with the amazing guests that I have lined up for you. I'm your host, Bridget Sloan, and this is season 3 of Flipping Out with Bridget Sloan. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Let's make some good life choices out there, and don't forget to be awesome. Bye, guys.